Well, I have had a sore back. I actually, you always like injure your back generally doing something dumb that, like it shouldn't cause an injury, like it's a non-load bearing thing. Katie and I have been in Mexico for the last week and have an awesome time ministering to people over there, gathering with some other pastors. It was awesome. We're flying back. We're landing in from Houston to Auckland, and they say, that we're about to land. It's now time to put your tray table up, put your bag under the seat in front of you. Come on, wives of airline people. Like there's the whole thing that they do your seatbelt up, make sure, everything's stowed away. So as I leant forward to push the bag under the seat in front of me, something went. Some sort of popping, pulling, and then almost crying sort of noise. And so I couldn't really, I'm not allowed to get up anymore. So I'm sort of just sort of stuck there for the next little bit. And then we're walking through the airport collecting all the bags, and I look like the most douche of a husband. Because Katie has to lift everything, like she's the one, I'm like with the trolley, and Katie's struggling off the belt with the bags, and people are looking at me. I'm like, that's right. That's how we roll. Anyway, it was one of those things, and we've got to be able to ask for help. Katie keeps saying, stop doing that. You need to learn to ask for help. And so we're doing this thing, but I realize, like we all do when we get uncomfortable, how much we love to be comfortable. Right? Like when you experience pain, when you're experiencing discomfort, it just freshly reminds you how much you appreciate comfort. I don't often think about standing up and sitting down. It just happens. But at the moment, I've got to psych myself up for it. I've got to get in the exact right position, and I've got to brace myself for the pain that I'm going to experience on the way up and the way down, That's like you never think about things before until you're uncomfortable, and then you're thinking about all of these things. And I don't know about you, but I think we're all probably the same. I'm just going to assume at the moment we love comfort. I mean, I'm going to be the first person. I say I love comfort. As much as traveling is really nice, arriving is the best part. Because then and arriving home is actually the best part. Back to your own bed, your own chairs, your own pillows, like you don't have to live out of a little box, your own wardrobe, your own toiletries, just the simple things, your own fridge, that doesn't, just all of those things. It's like we love comfort, and we don't like to be uncomfortable. I certainly don't like to be uncomfortable. And actually, sociologists have figured out that you could probably define Western society up in the pursuit of two things. Like if you sort of go, what are the two biggest driving forces of Western society? They would say materialism, like things, and more things, and the desire for comfort. In fact, I think many people probably moved to Whakatane, to Tauranga, or to the Mount for this idea of a more comfortable life. Maybe you moved from Auckland or from somewhere else yes, Jackie, you just moved, we move out to the country to a lifestyle block and then realize it's a life sentence and you move back in, it's like we do these moves for comfort, right? For the pursuit of that. That's how much it pulls us. But I want to propose today that we cannot follow Jesus fully and pursue comfort. That constantly the pursuit of Jesus and the pursuit of being everything He's called us to be, doing everything He's called us to do, to live the life He's calling us to live, and to pursue comfort most often will come at odds with each other. And we need to decide, are we going to be people whose highest values are those of our society, or are our highest values those of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ? You cannot fulfill your potential in your comfort zone. You cannot follow Jesus fully beyond just beliefs, but in a life in your comfort zone. It must require constantly stepping out of your comfort zone. It sucks. But it's the adventure of faith. It's the adventure of, I don't know about you, I live in this tension where I love comfort, but I don't want my life to be comfortable. Like I love it, but I despise it all at the same time. You know, when things get a little bit comfortable, I feel like I just need to come up with new ideas just to shake things up a little bit, because as much as I love it and as much as we all probably love it, we probably don't at the same time. Probably we are hungrier for something more than that, than comfort. Surely you're here today because you're hungrier for something more than comfort. Matthew chapter 11, chapter 14, false alarm. Just 2 pages over, we're okay. We've got it on the screen and all of that. Matthew 14, Jesus feeds 5,000 people. That's like a whole neighborhood, you know. That's like the average size of a New Zealand suburb, 5,000 people. He feeds 5,000 people. That's like a quarter of Whakatane, you know, like he feeds 5,000 people. Immediately after this, after what? After feeding 5,000 people with one person's lunch, with one McDonald's Happy Meal, he made everyone happy. Jesus insisted that his disciples get back into the boat and cross to the other side of the lake while he sent the people home. After sending them home, he went into the hills to pray by himself. Night fell while he was there alone. Meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble far away from land, for a strong wind had risen and they were fighting the heavy waves. About 3 o'clock in the morning, man, that's a bad night is happening right now. At 3 o'clock in the morning, they left in like before the sun went down. You know, this is a long night. When the Jesus came towards them walking on water. When disciples saw him walking on water, they were terrified in their fear. They cried out, "It's a ghost. It's Casper, you know. What's going on?" But Jesus spoke to them at once. "Don't be afraid," he said. "Take courage. I am here." Then Peter called to him, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water." "Yes, come," Jesus said. So Peter went over the side of the boat, walked on the water towards Jesus, but when he saw the strong wind, I don't know how you see wind, but whatever, and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink. "Save me, Lord," he shouted. Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. "You have so little faith," Jesus said. "Why did you doubt me?" I'm probably thinking, man, I just walked on water. When they climbed back into the boat, the wind stopped. Then the disciples worshipped him and said, "You really are the Son of God," they exclaimed. As if like the feeding of a whole neighborhood with one Happy Meal wasn't enough. You really are the Son of God. I want to use this passage, which is where like our theme for the year comes from, and I want to talk about how this passage invites us into the uncomfortable life of faith, but the life we probably all desire deep down. It invites us into the adventure. It invites us into our potential. It invites us into his presence. It invites us perhaps this year, perhaps this decade, perhaps even this month to step out of some things so that we can step into some things that God had planned for us since long ago. And if I could be so bold as to I think that even today, the stirrings of the Spirit in many of you are like, this is the time. This is the time. You know what I'm talking about. This is the time. This is the time. So let's unwrap this story a little bit as it leads us into this uncomfortable life. I'm just going to talk about the different elements of the story because I'm a simple person. I like to just think about things simply. Like we've got a boat. Somebody's out there thinking, you are not simple. You are complicated as. That's what Katie was thinking. So that's a lie. Here's a preaching's lying to you. So I want to talk about the boat. I want to talk about the water. I want to talk about the storm, and I want to talk about Peter. And in all of that, we're going to learn some stuff about stepping into this uncomfortable life. So firstly, the boat. Because the story's a metaphor, right? Like it actually happened, but it's also a metaphor. It's an allegory. It's got symbolism that speaks to us of deeper truths than what is just happening in the story. That's what's happening here. It actually happened, but it actually means more than just the happening of the story. That's why it's written and recorded for us. So firstly, the boat. What does the boat represent? Well, the boat represents the church. The boat represents the church. You think the boat represents the church trying to do church on its own terms. The boat represents church without Jesus. This is the first time ever in the story of the Gospels where Jesus sends the disciples somewhere where he's not going with them. And look what happens when they try it alone. Look what happens when they try it in their own strength. Look what happens when they try it on their own terms. The boat is the church. Just think of the stories of the gospel. If you know a little bit about the Bible, if you don't, it's okay. But there's one of the first stories in the stories of the gospel is there's a boat that hasn't caught any fish all night, even though it's been trying. And Jesus comes to the boat and makes it fruitful in its endeavors, and they catch more fish than they know what to do with because now Jesus is in the boat. Jesus, there's another story where he goes in with them in the boat and they travel across the lake towards the purposes that God has for them, and they encounter the inevitable storms in the journey to fulfill your purpose, but Jesus in the boat is able to calm the storm and get them through to the other side. The boat is the church. The boat is the church. The boat is us as collective people. He's sort of mixing metaphors. He's like breaking the rules of metaphors where you're not supposed to mix metaphors, but he is mixing metaphors because in some ways he's saying you need to step out of the boat, but then he only ever just takes Peter back to the boat. So just in case you're wondering, is he just going to tell me that I don't need the church anymore? That's not what I'm going to say. Because he's mixing metaphors with the boat. The boat in the first part of the story represents the church trying to do it in its own way, in its own terms. It's you and me trying to do church within our comfort zone, within what we think is reasonable, within what we think is what God is worthy of or whatever. And then when Jesus takes them back to the boat, now the boat is a place of worship. It is a place where they're on their knees before Jesus. It's a place where they're with him on his purposes, not going it alone, the boat. It can be popular not to love the church. To say we love Jesus, but to not love the church. To say we don't need her. To say we just need a community. To say we just need some friends. We just need some... But that's not what Jesus is saying in the story. I saw somebody, actually he's speaking next week at Curate, Nathan Finocchio. It's going to be awesome. He's like a comedic theologian. It's going to be fantastic. But he was asked this week, someone said, what are your thoughts on not going to church but having a strong community of believing friends? He replied this: no parents, no authority, no oversight, no covering, no spiritual inheritance, no impartation, no mantle, no vision for the past, no vision for the next generation, no depth, no wisdom, no strategy, no responsibility, no obligation, no deposit, no thanks. I thought that was fantastic. I heard someone say on Friday, I was at a little theology symposium, and they said, yeah, a group of friends hanging out talking about Jesus together isn't the church. It's a group of friends hanging out talking about Jesus together. That's what it is. The church is a place that anybody can come to. The church is a place that with the Spirit and the bride, it opens its doors and says, are you thirsty? Come. Even if I'd never hang out with you any other day of the week, come. Right? Even if there's nothing that would ever bring us together except Jesus, come. Like it's the church is a different thing. And we need that different thing. We need that thing that says, I need something from you and you need something from me, and I need the different generations, and I need to rub up against the people that otherwise I would never rub up against in my life. I need covering. I need prayer. I need support. I need wisdom. I need to be active. I need something so much bigger than me that ultimately I'm not in control of. That's what I need. I don't want it, but that's what I need. Boats are great. Jesus called them in it, and he led Peter back to her. And then he traveled with them the rest of the way. I wonder, at the moment, do you need to step out of your boat of doing church on your terms? At what you think is a reasonable level of engagement, of what you think is a reasonable level of style, of what you think is the way it should work, of what you think is reasonable generosity or sacrifice, of what you think is reasonable attendance, or attendance is even the wrong word because you never attend a boat. You either travel with her or you don't. I find constantly God calling me out of the boat of what I think is reasonable level of sacrifice and service to Him, to the place of trust, where it's all in for Him, and if it's not, I sink. And in my sinking, He calls out to me again, of course. You know, because we're mixing metaphors, we might as well do this. Just make it super head trippy and confusing for everybody. We're trying to build a boat here that you can take leaps of faith from. Not so that you're no longer a part of the boat, because we're mixing metaphors now, but that there's such a strength and encouragement. Have you noticed in the story, there wasn't 11 other disciples saying, Peter, don't do it. He's coming here anyway. Right? Like Jesus is coming towards them. Peter doesn't need to go to him. But you don't hear 11 people saying, Peter, don't go. Maybe it's because they were like, this will be awesome. Like, that's what we're trying to build here, is like a community of people that would call you to live an unreasonable life that would make no sense to your friends out there, and to your families out there, and to your colleagues out there, and to the world out there, but would only ever make sense to the people in here. Not because it's us versus them, but because there's a different way of seeing. It's a different kind of boat. It thinks that things that are unreasonable are reasonable. It's the boat. That's why, like today at small groups, we say like find your people, but what we don't mean is find people like you. Your people are not necessarily people like you. The best type of group is a group with people you think you don't need. But God knows better. It's the diversity of age. It's the diversity. We're not talking about find a holy huddle of friends, because you can like do friends any day of the week. We're talking about small groups. We're talking about church. We're talking about the drawing together of the unlikely friendships that do become friends and support each other to fulfill God's potential over our lives. If you ask any small group leader in our church, I promise the best ones would be the ones where they thought, I would never have hung out with these people if it wasn't for the group. But now I love these people. And they love me, and it's the most unlikely kind of family, because we're not talking about friends hanging out talking about Jesus. We're talking about church in its most organic, beautiful form, the group, the small group. So that's the boats, the water we can talk about. You know, the water in the scripture is a metaphor for the chaos that God's creative act always brings order to and holds at bay. The scriptures start by saying that the Spirit of the Lord hovered over the waters, and then He brought order to it through the creation story. It actually is, in biblical thought, God is the only one who can walk on water. In Job 9:8, it says, He alone has spread out the heavens and marches on the waves of the sea. So a Jewish person, these 12 disciples would have thought, there's only one person that can walk on water, and it's the Messiah. It's God Himself. So Jesus walking on water isn't so much about Him overcoming gravity as it is about Him displaying His power over all of the chaos and over all of the forces in this world. It's Him showing that He is above it all. So then in Romans 8:11, and it says, the Spirit of God who raised Jesus from the dead lives in you. And just as God raised Christ Jesus from the dead, He will give life to your immortal bodies by this same Spirit living in you. Isn't it interesting that they thought only the Messiah could ever walk on water, yet here we have Peter walking on water? Because Jesus isn't just looking to be the only one who walks on water, the only one who heals the sick, the only one who does amazing things, the only one who feeds 5,000. He isn't looking to be the only one who does those. He's looking actually to impart His power that's unreasonable and uncomfortable and requires the partnership of faith. He's actually looking to put it inside of us. In John 14:12, Jesus said, I tell you the truth, anyone who believes in me will do the same works I have done and even greater works, because I'm going to be with the Father. Now, I struggle with this verse so much because I don't do greater works yet. And that's faith. The faith is the yet. The faith is the yet. Peter hadn't also walked on water until Jesus actually called to him and said, now's a good time. Yes, come. And Peter had to go, well, I haven't done it before. When I've prayed for somebody, nobody's been healed yet. Oh, when I haven't seen you turn up in that miraculous way yet, God, but you said, yes, come, and if I put my faith to your specific command, I'm going to trust that what happens in that space in between is the miracle. The miracle is when His word meets our trust and we're willing to take our first step. That's what God's calling us to as a church. That unreasonable level of faith. Not presumption. This is where people get faith wrong, like where they think just because God can do it means He will do it. God can do lots of things, but He won't do lots of things for whatever reason. It's up to He's God. I'm given up trying to understand everything. You should too. It makes faith way more enjoyable. It's like if I went to go walk on water today, as much as God could make me walk on water, if He wanted to, I'm going to sink at the beach. Because it's not about what God can do, it's about what He's calling me to do. And in each specific moment, it's why we must be people who know His voice and hear His call if we want to truly be people of faith. It's why we must know the Scriptures and know the difference between what are displaying things that somebody else did and that people could do or that God could do, or what are the actual things He's calling us to do. Because when we follow His word to the things that He's actually calling us to do, we will find the miracles always happen in those gaps. If we presume all the time, we'll find ourselves wet and disappointed. We were in Mexico City, and there's a statue, like a replica statue of David. David. I don't even know how he's standing. I didn't take long enough to look at it. It's in the middle of this beautiful park. We looked at it for about 2 seconds because over to the side was a doggy daycare. And there were every type of breed of dogs, and our daughter loves dogs. So I had the camera out, Katie had the camera out, we're filming all of the dogs. There's about 20 different dogs all sitting in the shade waiting for their time to play with the trainer. It was so cute, it was amazing. It was like Harry McCleary, but in real life. It was all the different breeds, it was all there. And I was just, Katie and I walked away from it and like, there's a sermon illustration. Katie actually gave it to me. I was like, yeah, like as amazing as that thing is, it's dead. Like the statue, it's dead. And so we came all of this way. There's only 2 of these in the world. This is the replica one. We came all of this way and we stared at some dogs. Because there's something about us that's drawn to life, right? There's this, like, that's way more exciting to watch. It's way more exciting to be a part of. As awesome as the monument is, it's life. This is faith. Faith isn't like a monument to the past. It isn't this life of faith isn't your set of beliefs or the set of things you've subscribed to or the things you agree with. It isn't just those things. It's the life lived. What makes us different is not just that we think differently, but that thinking somehow permeates our being and we're not statues to the past. Well, we're mixing metaphors and dogs playing in the park. Storms. We're almost there. Storms. Storms are the resistance to the work of God. They are inevitable in all of our lives. There is nothing that God ever calls you to do that will be achieved without some form of resistance. So we might as well stop whining about it and keep rowing and keep praying and hope Jesus turns up soon. I mean, I just think of every major leap of faith we've tried to take as a church has been met with resistance. It's like, we did this stupid thing, we were like, let's open in Tauranga and let's buy and renovate the Mount building. Let's do it all at the same time. Like, let's take all of this ground for the kingdom. Oh, the worst 18 months of our lives. The worst. We've had some bad seasons, but that was definitely the worst. Because like that was, it's like you're trying to take ground, storms are inevitable. I'm just trying to I'm not trying to speak storms over your life, but they're just going to be there this year. If you're going to live a yes-come life, just brace yourself for the storm. Don't get overwhelmed by the storm. Don't get discouraged by the storm. If anything, the storm is a good sign you're on the right track. Hold your faith in the storm. Trust Him in the storm. Let Him form something deeper in you in the storm, because at the click of His finger, when the storm's fulfilled its purposes, He will calm the storm. The promise is the storm will always come to an end. Peter's not special, you know that? In this story, Peter's not special. He's just representative of all of the disciples. That's why the rest of them aren't really mentioned. Because Peter is like, they're saying like, Peter's like what all 12 of them are like. They'd rather be in the seas with Jesus than in the boats of their own comfort. He's an example for us. I love how much this whole story wasn't about Peter. Because in Peter's retelling of the gospel, which is the Gospel of Mark, he doesn't even mention that he walked on water. And I don't think it's because he's embarrassed that he's sunk, because he's the only one that can claim he walked. I think it's just the story was never about him. It was about the boat and the journey without Jesus, and then Jesus coming towards them, and then Jesus calming the storm and them fulfilling the purpose. It wasn't about him anyway. It was all about Jesus, so he didn't really feel to mention himself in the story. You know, Peter could walk on water and have faith because he actually positioned himself under the authority of God. You cannot live this uncomfortably beautiful, adventurous faith life without positioning yourself under the authority of God. Many of us have, without realizing it, we've positioned ourselves over the authority of God. God, do this for me. God, do that for me. God, help me with this. God, do this. But we know it's not under this overarching thing. All of this is for your glory. It's actually all for my glory. And I don't know if you've realized, but glory don't look that good on humans. But it looks awesome on God. So Peter positions himself under authority. That's why when Jesus says to him, yes, come, he actually goes. He silences his opinions about whether or not he thinks he can walk on water. He calms the fears and the concerns that the waves might overwhelm him. And he responds, well, if you said it, God, here I come. What has God said to you? That you're making way more complicated than it is because you haven't just positioned yourself under His authority? Well, just some closing things. Faith is about intimacy. Faith is about intimacy. Write these down if you're taking notes. Faith is about intimacy. It's understanding when He says, yes, come, He's not kicking you out of a boat, but He's inviting you into an abiding journey with Him. He's not pushing you away from His presence when He's calling you to take risks. He's drawing you into His presence. When I gave my life to Jesus, I thought it was all about giving up doing bad stuff and choosing to do boring good stuff. But I realized it wasn't about that. That faith of giving my life to Jesus was just about drawing near to who He was. We need to understand this. Faith is spelled R-I-S-K. Faith is spelled risk. When you get married, you take a leap of faith. Right? There's a risk. But without the risk, then it can never be the reward. Faith requires a healthy boat. I think if we want to have a healthy faith, we need a healthy boat to be a part of. When we build strong boats, we give people a platform to take faith leaps. Sometimes we need to realize we need to learn to ride in the boat and row the boat and sail the boat before it's time to leap out of the boat. There's a process. You need to understand this. Faith will always lead us towards others who do not know Jesus. Faith doesn't make us more weird and more isolated and more unhelpful to the world. Faith makes us more helpful to the world. Faith leads us out to the lost and to the broken and to the struggling. That's what faith does. And faith is about Jesus, not about us. It's not about us living our best adventurous life. It's about Jesus accomplishing his purposes in and through us in this world. Look, the early church took incredible risks. People risked their health, their safety, their financial security, and their very lives for the sake of the gospel. They understood that following Jesus was not about surviving, but it was about thriving. They really understood that you cannot follow Jesus in your comfort zone. You cannot fulfill your potential in your comfort zone. You cannot live the life that God put you on this earth to do in your comfort zone. It will require unreasonable acts. And I want to call us today as a church to re-engage with the unreasonable acts of faith. What's that? You're sick? Let me pray for you. What's that? You need help? Let me give to you. What's that? You need a friend? Let me buy you a coffee. What's that? You're struggling? Let me intercede for you. What's that? You need me there? I'm on my way. The unreasonable acts of faith. Oh God, you called me to build this business, to fund your kingdom. Well, I'm actually going to fund your kingdom, not just build the business. Oh God, you called me to raise a family that loves you and puts you first. I'm actually going to organize the life of our family calendar around that value and not the world's rhythms. What's that, God? You called me to invest in the next generation? Give me that kid's lanyard. Do the police check, of course. I just think, there's in Hebrews 11, I'm going to finish with this. In Hebrews 11, it says, it's talking about faith. It's the faith chapter of the scripture. It says, here's all the amazing things people have done by faith. They slayed giants by faith. They conquered nations by faith. They left their homes by faith. They clung on to promises by faith. They raised the dead by faith. It just goes on like the Hall of Fame of faith. Here they all are. Here they all are. And it's got this awesome little encouraging section. And all of these people, they didn't see everything that was promised to them, but they died in faith. Because whether they saw everything or not, God's bringing everyone together to see the full completion at exactly the same time that none might arrive before the others. But I wonder, what do you want said about your life by faith? What's going to be said by faith? What could be told about your story? By faith, they raised God-fearing, Jesus-loving, church-building families. By faith, they built businesses that blessed people and built the kingdom. By faith, they practiced their gifts and saw God move miraculously. By faith, they served kids and transformed family legacies. By faith, they were set free from addictions. By faith, they led teenagers and reclaimed a generation for God. By faith, they went to schools and they were renewed, and revival broke out all around the students. By faith, they moved cities and were used by God. By faith, they stepped out of their comfort zones. And who would have thought that the water would have solidified under their feet?